Amid a storm, two little twin girls are thrown out of their home for an absurd reason. Desperate, they manage to call their father and whisper, "Dad, we're eating in the rain." The phrase pierces the man's heart like lightning, making him drop everything and run home. What he finds upon arrival forever changes his perspective on love, family, and what truly matters. Before listening to this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting tales. The rain fell mercilessly on the imposing mansion on the outskirts of the capital. It was one of those nights when the sky seemed to collapse, as if announcing an imminent tragedy. Inside the luxurious Allianz home, the silence was broken only by the clinking of silver cutlery against the fine china. Helena, with her austere countenance and perfectly straight back, watched her twin daughters with critical eyes. Olivia and Chiara, two 6-year-old girls identical in appearance but opposite in temperament, tried to behave like little adults, fearful of any wrong move. "Sit properly," Helena ordered, adjusting the linen napkin on her lap. "Remember who you are. Daughters of the Allianz family do not bow at the table." Olivia, the more sensitive and dreamy of the two, swallowed hard. Her small fingers trembled slightly as she held the fork. Chiara, on the other hand, maintained a rigid posture, her eyes mirroring her mother's determination, as if she had already learned that the only way to survive in that home was to become a perfect reflection of Helena. "Your father is in an important meeting today," Helena commented, pouring herself some water, as always prioritizing work over family. The girls remained silent. They had learned early on that answering meant prolonging uncomfortable conversations. Marco Allianz, a respected businessman in the real estate industry, rarely dined at home. His absences were filled by Helena's excessive rigidity, which turned every meal into an unbearable etiquette lesson. That's when it happened. Olivia, reaching for the salt, bumped into her glass. The grape juice spilled onto the immaculate white tablecloth like a stain of violet ink on a blank canvas. Time stood still. Helena's eyes narrowed, her nostrils flared, and a deathly silence filled the room. "Look what you've done," she whispered, with a terrifying calm. "Look at the mess you've made." Tears began to well up in Olivia's eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. It was an accident." Helena stood up slowly, adjusting her silk dress. "Accidentally?" "Nothing is accidental, Olivia. Everything has consequences." Chiara, trying to protect her sister, intervened. "I can clean, Mom. I can help." "No," Helena interrupted. "You two need a lesson in responsibility." With calculated movements, Helena gripped her daughter's arms tightly enough to leave marks. She dragged them down the marble hallway to the back door. The girls, confused and frightened, didn't understand what was happening. The kitchen maid lowered her eyes, pretending not to see. She had witnessed similar scenes before, and knew that interfering would mean losing her job. "Mommy, it's raining," Olivia whimpered. "Exactly," Helena replied, opening the door. The cold wind and torrential rain flooded the room. "The rain will wash away the dirt you carry. You will learn to value a clean and organized home." With a shove, the twins were shoved out. The door was locked. Helena returned to the dining room, resumed her place at the table, and continued her meal as if nothing had happened. Outside, soaked and trembling, Olivia and Chiara embraced under the narrow balcony that offered little protection from the storm. Their brown hair, once perfectly combed, clung to their pale faces. Olivia sobbed openly while Chiara maintained a stoic expression, her eyes fixed on the closed door. "She'll let us in soon," Chiara whispered, trying to comfort her sister, but not believing her own words. A few meters away, at the back gate of the property, Rose Carmen watched the scene in horror. A former employee of the Allianz household, she had been fired 3 months earlier for questioning Helena's disciplinary methods. Now, 7 months pregnant, she had returned to retrieve some documents she had left behind. What she witnessed made her blood boil. Rose knew those girls well. During the 2 years she worked at the mansion, she had been practically the only source of affection for Olivia and Chiara. How many times had she secretly dried their tears after yet another of Helena's educational punishments? How many stories had she told them so they could sleep without nightmares? Resting her hand on her distended belly, Rose made a decision. She wouldn't just stand by and watch this time. Memories of her own childhood, marked by similar abuse, weighed heavily on her chest. She glanced once more at the girls huddled in the rain and pulled her cell phone from her pocket. She knew Marco's number by heart, They had spoken only a few times, since the businessman was rarely home when she worked there, but he needed to know what happened in his absence. With trembling fingers, he dialed. 3 rings later, Marco's deep voice answered. "Allianz speaking." Rose took a deep breath. "Mr. Allianz, this is Rose, a former employee of your household. You need to come immediately. Your daughters are locked outside in the rain." There was a moment of confused silence. "What do you mean, in the rain? Explain yourself better." "His wife put them out as punishment. They're soaked, shivering with cold. It's not the first time this has happened, sir." Marco asked Rose to stay on the line. She could hear voices in the background. She was interrupting a meeting. Seconds later, he returned. "I'm on my way. Don't leave their side." Rose hung up and looked at the twins again. They hadn't noticed her yet, huddled against the wall as they were. Gathering her courage, Rose opened the gate and walked through the muddy garden, ignoring the rain that was now soaking her clothes as well. As she approached, Chiara was the first to notice her. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Rose," the girl whispered. Olivia turned quickly, a sob escaping her lips. "Rose, you're back." In a sudden impulse, both children ran to her, hugging her legs. Rose knelt down, ignoring the pain in her back and the mud that stained her dress. She hugged them tightly, trying to convey the warmth that her body still held. "I'm here," he murmured, kissing the tops of their wet heads. "I'm here and I won't leave you alone again." Inside the luxury car that cut through the flooded streets of the capital, Marco Allianz could barely breathe. Rose's words still echoed in his mind, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. His daughters, in the rain, as punishment. The revelation had been like a punch to the gut that made him immediately abandon the meeting with international investors. "Faster, please," he pleaded with the driver, watching the storm batter the city through the fogged-up window. Marco had always been a businessman, methodical and calculating. He had built a real estate empire following strict rules and delegating domestic life to his wife, Helena. He trusted her to raise their daughters with the same discipline he applied to business. But there was something in Rose's words that had awakened a primal fear, an anguish he had never felt before. Meanwhile, in the mansion's garden, Rose hugged the twins beneath a small tree that offered little protection from the relentless rain. Olivia sobbed silently, her small body trembling uncontrollably. Chiara, always more reserved, kept her eyes fixed on the house as if trying to understand how the place that should have been her refuge had turned into a prison. "Daddy's coming," Rose whispered, stroking the girl's soaking wet hair. "He's already on his way. Mum will be even angrier if she finds out you called him," Chiara replied, with wisdom beyond her years. "She doesn't like it when people talk about what happens at home." Rose felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. That phrase revealed a pattern of secrets and silences she knew all too well. In her own childhood, she had learned that the walls of the most elegant houses often hid the darkest stories. "Some things can't stay secret, Chiara," he replied, looking into the girl's eyes. "Some things need to be said." Inside the mansion, Helena finished her meal with her usual methodical calm. She checked the wall clock. 20 minutes had passed since she had sent her daughters outside. Enough time for them to learn their lesson, she thought. She rose elegantly, adjusted her napkin, and walked to the window. Through the fogged glass, she could see the silhouettes of her daughters in the garden. She frowned when she noticed a third figure beside them. Who would dare interfere with her parenting methods? The sound of tires screeching on the gravel outside interrupted her thoughts. Helena recognized the sound of Marco's car engine. Confused, she glanced at her watch again. He never came home so early from business meetings. Something was wrong. Marco barely waited for the car to come to a complete stop before jumping out. The rain immediately soaked his expensive Italian suit, but he didn't even notice. His eyes scanned the garden until he found what he was looking for. 2 small figures embracing a pregnant woman under a tree. "Daddy!" shouted Olivia, being the first to spot him. Marco ran towards his daughters, kneeling in the mud without caring about his ruined pants. He hugged the twins tightly, feeling their small, cold bodies against his. The initial shock gave way to a growing anger. "I'm here now," he whispered, kissing their wet foreheads. "No one will hurt you." Looking up, he met Rose's eyes. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Thank you for not staying silent." Rose simply nodded, a protective hand resting on her prominent belly. They needed someone by their side, she replied simply. The mansion door opened, and Helena appeared in the doorway, a silhouette outlined against the golden light of the interior. Her normally composed face displayed surprise and indignation. "Marco, what are you doing here? I thought you were in a meeting." Marco stood up slowly with a twin in each arm, his eyes normally calculating and cold in business, now burned with a contained fury. "What am I doing here?" he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "Perhaps the question is, what are our daughters doing in the rain, Helena?" Helena adjusted her pearl necklace, a nervous gesture Marco had never noticed before. "It's just a disciplinary punishment, dear. They spilled juice on the imported linen tablecloth. They needed to learn about consequences." Consequences? Marco stepped toward the entrance, the girls still clinging to him like little castaways to a lifeboat. "They're 6 years old, Helena. 6 years old." As he passed his wife and entered the house, Marco noticed something he had never seen before. The slight recoil of his daughters as they approached their mother, the way they hid their faces in her neck, trembling not only from the cold. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Helena closed the door, casting a venomous glance at Rose, who remained in the garden. "I don't know what you're talking about, and you shouldn't listen to a fired maid who obviously wants to cause trouble." "We were having dinner in the rain, Daddy," Olivia replied in a small voice. "Mummy said we could only go back when we learned." Those simple, childlike words struck Marco like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, all the little anomalies he had ignored for years began to make sense. His daughter's prolonged silences when he returned from trips, their frightened looks when Helena raised her voice, the frequent falls that resulted in bruises. "Let's go upstairs," she told the girls. "You need a hot bath and dry clothes." "Marco," Helena said, grabbing his arm, "you're exaggerating. This is between me and the girls." "You've never cared about their parenting methods before." He recoiled from his wife's touch as if he had been burned. "Because I never knew what her methods were, Helena. But now I see them clearly for the first time." Carrying the twins upstairs, Marco felt something break inside him. The carefully constructed image of his perfect family had just crumbled like a house of cards. In the master suite bathroom, he helped his daughters undress, and that's when he saw it. Small marks in different stages of healing on the girls' arms and backs, silent evidence of systematic cruelty happening under his own roof, while he was too busy building an empire. "Who did this to you?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. Olivia and Chiara exchanged glances, that silent communication that only twins possess. It was Chiara who answered, in a small but firm voice. "We can't tell you, Dad." "It's a family secret." Marco felt tears burning his eyes. "There are no more secrets, my little ones. I promise you." While the girls were taking a bath, he dialed his lawyer's number. The conversation was brief and to the point. Upon hanging up, he made a decision that would change the course of all their lives. That would be the last night his daughters would spend under the same roof as Helena. Downstairs, Helena watched the rain through the living room window. She saw Marco come down the stairs with a suitcase in each hand, followed by the twins already dressed in warm clothes. She showed no surprise, only a cold disdain. "Where do you think you're going with my daughters?" Marco stopped, staring at her. "Away from you, and tomorrow my lawyers will contact you to discuss the terms of the divorce and custody." Helena laughed, a humorless sound. "You think you're going to take my daughters away from me? I'm their mother. No judge will grant custody to an absent father who barely knows his own home." "Maybe not," he replied, opening the door. "But I have a witness outside, and marks on their bodies that tell a different story." As he walked through the garden, Marco stopped where Rose was still waiting, protecting her belly from the now lighter rain. "I need your help," he said. "I need you to tell me everything you saw in this house." Rose looked at the twins, who watched her with hope in their eyes. She remembered her own childhood, the scars she still carried not only on her body but on her soul, scars from when no one was brave enough to interfere. "I'll tell you everything," he replied, his voice firm despite his tired body. Down to the last detail, the cold light of the children's hospital accentuated the pallor on the faces of the sleeping twins. Marco watched his daughters lying side by side in the same bed, refusing to be separated even to sleep. It had been a long day of exams, documentary photos, and delicate questions from doctors and social workers. With each new mark discovered on the girls' bodies, With each involuntary shudder when someone raised their voice, Marco's determination grew exponentially. Multiple bruises in different stages of healing, explained Dr. Viola, a pediatrician specializing in abuse cases. Some recent, others weeks old. There are also signs of mild malnutrition and prolonged stress. Marco nodded, unable to speak. Guilt consumed him from the inside. How had he not noticed? How had he allowed this to happen? Mr. Alliance, the doctor continued, I need to ask, didn't you notice any signs earlier? The question was like a knife. Marco ran his hands over his tired face. I was constantly traveling. When I was home, the girls seemed quiet, obedient. Helena always said it was the result of good upbringing. I believed that. Her voice faltered. I believed what was convenient to believe. Across the room, Rose watched the scene with tired eyes. She had spent the entire night there, refusing to leave the twins even when her own condition demanded rest. Her 7-month pregnant belly weighed heavily, and occasionally she felt small contractions, which she attributed to the stress of the situation. The important thing now is that you are taking action, the doctor said, her voice softer. And from what I understand, you have a witness to the abuse. Marco looked at Rose, who was absent-mindedly stroking her belly while watching the girls sleep. Yes, I do. Rose worked in our house for 2 years. She saw much more than I ever saw. The former employee approached when she heard her name, her steps slow and careful. Doctor, I already gave my statement to the social worker, but I can repeat it as many times as necessary, she said with determination. I saw Helena punish the girls cruelly on repeated occasions, locking them in a dark closet for hours, leaving them without food, pinching them in ways that left marks. Marco closed his eyes. Each word felt like a blow. He had built a financial empire, while his true treasure was being systematically destroyed in his own home. The medical report will be crucial for the temporary custody request, explained Dr. Viola. I will be sending it to the court later today. I suggest you get some rest. The girls will be under observation tonight. After the doctor left, a heavy silence settled in the room. Marco observed his daughter's sleeping faces, searching for similarities with the woman he thought he knew. How could Helena, whom he had known at architecture school, elegant, ambitious, seemingly loving, have transformed into a monster capable of hurting her own daughters? Rose, he called, without taking his eyes off the girls. Why didn't you ever tell me? The question hung in the air for a few moments. Rose shifted uncomfortably in her chair before answering. I tried, Mr. Alliance. His voice was low but firm. I left 3 messages with your secretary. I sent an email detailing my concerns. I never received a reply. The final blow to Marco's conscience. He vaguely remembered Helena commenting on a problematic maid who made up stories. He had believed her without question. Is that why they fired you? Rose nodded. Helena discovered I had hidden Olivia in the laundry room closet when she wanted to punish her for knocking over a vase. I was fired the same day without references. Marco covered his face with his hands. I'm sorry, Rose, I should have... You didn't know, she interrupted with surprising kindness. Or perhaps you didn't want to know. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that girls have a chance at a normal childhood from now on. A soft moan interrupted the conversation. Olivia woke up, her startled eyes scanning the room until they found her father and Rose. She immediately relaxed. You didn't leave, she whispered, as if she didn't believe it. Marco approached, stroking his daughter's hair. I'll never leave again, Princess, I promise. Chiara also woke up, quieter as always. Her intelligent eyes studied her surroundings before she spoke. Mom isn't coming here, is she? The question made Marco swallow hard. No, dear, you're safe here. She's going to be very angry, Chiara continued, her small face taking on a worried, adult expression. When we get sick, she says it's just fussiness. Rose approached, sitting on the edge of the bed. No one will say you're making anything up, Chiara. The doctors saw the injuries. They know the truth. Olivia reached out, gently touching Rose's belly. Is your baby okay? You stood in the rain for our sake. The question, so full of concern for others amidst her own suffering, brought tears to Rose's eyes. My baby is strong, she replied, covering the small hand with her own. Just like you two. Marco's cell phone vibrated. It was his lawyer, Victor. I need to answer this, he said, stepping back a little. Victor, any news? Several and none good, replied the lawyer on the other end of the line. Helena has already hired Aaron Limon, the shark of family law, and her mother, Agnes Muller, is mobilizing contacts. From what I understand, she has already spoken with 3 judges. Marco felt his stomach clench. Agnes Muller was an influential figure in high society, known for her donations to charities and her powerful network of contacts. He had never liked his mother-in-law, with her air of superiority and biting remarks, but he had tolerated her presence at the obligatory family dinners. What does this mean for our custody request? It means we need to be impeccable, Victor explained. The medical report is a start, but we need the formal testimony of your former employee. The sooner the better. Marco looked at Rose, who was chatting softly with the twins, a gentle smile lighting up her tired face. She's here with me at the hospital. We'll go to her office as soon as the girls are discharged. As he hung up, Marco felt the weight of the battle he was about to face. Helena was not only a formidable opponent in her own right, she came from an influential family, with old money and connections in all the important circles. Agnes would certainly use every resource at her disposal to protect her daughter and the family name. A gentle touch on her arm interrupted her thoughts. It was Rose. The girls are asking if they can have breakfast. I think they're hungry. Marco nodded, grateful for the normalcy of the request. Of course, I'll order something for the 4 of us. While they waited for breakfast, Olivia, always the most talkative, asked shyly, Dad, where are we going to live now? The question caught Marco off guard. In his haste to get his daughters out of the house, he hadn't planned his next steps. Well, I have an apartment downtown, he replied, referring to the flat he kept for nights when he worked late. We can stay there for now until we find a new house. Is Rose going to live with us? Chiara asked, surprising everyone with the direct question. Rose blushed, looking away. Marco realized how attached the girls had become to her, probably the only consistent source of affection in their lives. Rose has her own house, he replied cautiously. But she needs help with the baby, Olivia insisted. Mom always said that pregnant women shouldn't be alone. It was possibly the only sensible thing Helena had ever said. Marco looked at Rose, noticing for the first time the weariness in her eyes, the way she discreetly massaged her back. Do you have someone to help her? He asked, realizing he knew very little about the woman who had risked so much to save her daughters. Rose hesitated before answering. I live alone. The baby's father is no longer in the picture. Something about the way she looked away made Marco suspect there was more to the story, but it wasn't the time for personal questions. Well, if you need anything. Rose can stay in our room, exclaimed Olivia, her eyes shining with the idea. We can take care of the baby when he's born. The child's suggestion brought a smile to Marco's face for the first time in days. It's not that simple, dear. Why not? Chiara asked with the relentless logic of children. We have space. Rose needs help. We like her. Marco and Rose exchanged awkward glances, saved by the arrival of breakfast. While the girls ate with renewed appetite, Marco's cell phone vibrated again. It was a message from Victor. I just received the notification. Helena filed for sole custody, alleging that you are an absent and negligent father. The preliminary hearing is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Marco felt his blood run cold. So fast. He looked at his daughters, still bearing visible marks on their delicate arms, and then at Rose, whose eyes conveyed that she knew exactly what was at stake. I'll be there, she murmured, as if reading his thoughts. I'll tell you everything I saw. At that moment, Marco understood that his life had changed forever. The empire he had built, the social connections, the carefully cultivated public image, none of that mattered now. The only thing that truly mattered was protecting those 2 girls who watched him with a mixture of hope and fear. Everything will be all right, he promised, more to himself than to the children. We'll be fine. The spacious hall of the courthouse teemed with murmurs and curious glances. Seated in an uncomfortable wooden chair, Agnes Muller observed the activity with hawk-like eyes. At 70, she maintained the impeccable posture and austere countenance that had made her both feared and respected in the social circles of the capital. Beside her, Helena seemed a younger version of her mother, although her normally composed face now displayed signs of tension. Stop fidgeting with the necklace, Agnes hissed, without moving her lips. It shows insecurity. Helena immediately let the pearls fall against her chest, adjusting her posture. Dressed in a discreet grey suit and light makeup, she looked like the image of a worried mother, exactly as Aaron Limon had instructed. "Remember what we agreed on," Agnes continued in a low voice. "You were always a devoted mother. Marco was the absent one. You simply applied normal discipline, like any good mother." Across the hallway, Marco watched the interaction between mother and daughter with a mixture of anger and newfound understanding. Now he understood where Helena's coldness came from. Agnes was known for her unwavering rigidity and her obsession with appearances. How many times had he heard Helena say that she was raised with discipline and became a strong woman because of it? It was a cycle of abuse disguised as good upbringing that perpetuated itself through generations. "Don't look at them," advised Victor, his lawyer. "It only fuels the charade they're putting on." Marco looked away, focusing on Rose, who sat uncomfortably beside him. She seemed out of place in the formal setting, with her simple dress and hair tied up in a modest bun. Her face reflected tiredness and worry. "Are you okay?" Marco asked, noticing how she occasionally rested her hand on her stomach. "I am," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just a little nervous. I've never been in a courtroom before." "Just tell the truth, exactly as it happened," Victor advised. "Don't let Limon confuse you or put words in your mouth." Rose nodded, though apprehension lingered on her face. It wasn't just the intimidating atmosphere or the importance of the moment that worried her. Since dawn, she'd been experiencing irregular contractions, which she attributed to stress. She hadn't mentioned this to Marco. He already had enough to worry about. "Are the girls all right?" she asked, trying to deflect attention from herself. "Yes," Marco replied with a sigh. "My sister Anna is with them in the apartment. I didn't want them to go through this." The courtroom door opened, and a court officer called those involved. As they entered, Marco felt the weight of their stares. There were more people than expected for a closed preliminary hearing. Victor leaned in, whispering, "Agnes must have pulled some strings. See those men in the corner? One's the editor of the city's main newspaper, the other's an aide to Congressman Ollins." Marco felt his stomach sink. Agnes was turning the case into a public issue, mobilizing allies to pressure the judge and destroy his reputation before the trial had even truly begun. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, entered the room. Marco vaguely recognized him from social events sponsored by Agnes's foundation. It wasn't a good sign. "We are here to decide on the provisional custody of the minors, Olivia and Chiara Allianz," the judge began, adjusting his glasses. "I understand there are serious allegations from both sides." Aaron Limon, a man in an impeccable suit and a calculated smile, stood up first. "Your Excellency, my client, Mrs. Helena Allianz, has been suffering a smear campaign orchestrated by her ex-husband, who abandoned the marital home suddenly, taking the couple's daughters without any authorization." Victor immediately protested. "Your Honor, my client removed the children from a situation of imminent danger, as evidenced by the medical reports already attached to the case file. Reports that can easily be explained by the normal activities of active children," Lyman countered. "Mrs. Helena has always been an exemplary mother, while Mr. Marco, with all due respect, barely knew the routine of his own daughters." The debate continued for almost an hour, with accusations flying from both sides. Helena maintained her composure, occasionally discreetly wiping away tears with a silk handkerchief, a performance Marco had never witnessed in all their years of marriage. Finally, the moment for Rose's testimony arrived. She stood with difficulty, one hand supporting her large belly, and walked to the podium. After taking the oath, she faced the room with a determination that surprised everyone. "Mrs. Carmin," Limon began, circling her like a predator, "what exactly was your role in the Allianz residence?" "I was a governess and looked after the children when Mrs. Helena was busy, which was often," Rose replied, keeping her voice firm. "And she was fired, correct? Can you tell us why?" Rose took a deep breath. "I was fired for interfering with one of the punishments Helena gave the girls. She had locked Chiara in a dark closet for hours because the girl spilled milk on the table." Murmurs filled the room. Helena shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "That's a very convenient story," Lyman retorted. "But we have no way of verifying it, do we? It's your word against that of my client, a woman respected in society." "I have proof," Rose replied, surprising everyone. Victor raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting that. Marco straightened up in his chair, equally surprised. "What kind of evidence?" the judge asked, leaning forward. "During my time in the house, I kept a diary detailing the incidents of abuse I witnessed," Rose explained, pulling a worn notebook from her bag, with dates, times, and precise descriptions. "I also have some photographs." The room fell into a deathly silence. Helena visibly paled, while Agnes gripped her purse so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Victor quickly stood up. "Your Excellency, we request that this material be attached to the file immediately." The judge, visibly uncomfortable, agreed. "The court will review this material. Continue with your testimony, Ms. Carmen." Over the next 2 hours, Rose methodically detailed each incident she had witnessed. Disproportionate punishments, humiliations, food deprivation, exposure to the cold. Her voice, initially hesitant, gained strength with each account. When she finally finished, there were tears in the eyes of some of those present. Liman tried to discredit her, insinuating that she had a relationship with Marco, that she was spiteful for having been fired, that she had financial motivations. Rose responded to everything with a quiet dignity that contrasted with the lawyer's aggressive tactics. "Miss Carmen, what is your current relationship with Mr. Allianz?" Lehman asked, in an insinuating tone. "I'm temporarily staying at his apartment, in a separate room because the girls feel safe with me there," she replied calmly. "There's no other kind of relationship between us." "Really? A young, pregnant, unemployed woman suddenly finds shelter in the home of a wealthy, recently separated man?" "I object, Your Excellency," Victor interrupted. "The lawyer is making insinuations without any factual basis." "Accepted," the judge agreed. "Mr. Lyman, stick to the facts." But the damage was done. Marco saw the glances exchanged between the people in the gallery, the whispers. Agnes had leaned in to say something in the ear of one of the journalists present. When the hearing was suspended so the judge could review the presented material, Marco accompanied Rose out of the room. She seemed exhausted. "Why didn't you tell me about the diary?" he asked, as he helped her sit down on a bench in the hallway. "Because I wasn't sure if it would be useful," she replied, massaging her back. "And because it contains other things too, things from my past." Marco was about to ask more questions, but was interrupted by the arrival of Agnes, who approached with firm steps, completely ignoring Rose. "You've always been a fool, Marco," said his mother-in-law in an icy voice. "But I never thought you were capable of destroying your own family because of the lies of a spiteful maid." "The lies are on your side, Agnes," he replied, keeping his voice low. "They always have been. How much damage have you caused your own daughter with these discipline methods you so strongly defend?" A dangerous glint flashed through Agnes's eyes. "You don't know who you're dealing with. By the end of the week, your reputation will be ruined. I've already spoken to your partners, to the construction company's board of directors. Everyone knows you abandoned your wife for a pregnant employee." Marco felt his blood boil, but before he could respond, Rose let out a muffled groan beside him. He turned in time to see the expression of pain on her face. "Rose? What happened?" "Nothing. Just—" She took a deep breath. "Just a contraction. I've been having a few since yesterday, but it's nothing serious. There are still almost 2 months to go." Agnes watched the scene with disdain. How convenient. His mistress having the bastard baby in the middle of the process. This will look great in tomorrow's papers. Rose looked up, staring at Agnes with surprising strength. "I am no one's lover, Mrs. Muller, and unlike you, I do not use children as instruments to control others." Agnes recoiled as if she had been slapped. For a moment her mask of coldness slipped, revealing genuine surprise. No one, especially someone she considered inferior, had ever dared to confront her directly. "You'll regret this," he threatened, before walking away with stiff steps. Victor approached, having observed the interaction from afar. Bad news. The judge granted temporary joint custody until the next hearing, in 2 weeks. "What?" exclaimed Marco, incredulous. "After everything Rose witnessed? The medical evidence?" "Politics," Victor replied bitterly. "Agnes has already done her job. The judge is trying not to displease anyone powerful while he buys time. The girls will spend a week with each of them." Marco felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The idea of handing his daughters back to Helena, even if only for a week, was unbearable. "I can't allow that," she whispered. "You saw the fear in their eyes. I can't send them back." Victor placed his hand on her shoulder. We have 2 weeks to build a stronger case. Rose's diary was accepted as evidence, which is already a victory. Now, we need more. Someone who can corroborate her testimony. Former employees, neighbors, the girls' teachers. Rose tried to stand up, but shuddered with another contraction. Marco noticed that her face was pale, and a thin layer of sweat covered her forehead. "You need to go to the hospital," he said, worried. "No," she protested. "I just need to rest a little. We can't give up now. The girls need you strong and healthy," Marco interrupted. "Victor will continue working on the case while we take care of you." As he helped Rose walk out of the courthouse, Marco felt the weight of the stares that followed them. Agnes had planted the seed of doubt. Now, to the outside world, he wasn't a father fighting for his daughter's safety, but a middle-aged businessman in crisis who had abandoned his wife for a pregnant employee. Outside, a small group of reporters waited. Someone, Marco didn't need to guess who, had leaked information about the hearing. Flashes went off when they appeared on the staircase. "Mr. Allianz, is it true that you left your wife for an employee? Is the pregnancy yours, Mr. Allianz? Why is your wife accusing you of kidnapping?" Marco shielded Rose with his body, quickly guiding her to the waiting car. As he closed the door, he saw Helena and Agnes leaving the courthouse, posing perfectly as victims for the cameras. The battle was only beginning, and Marco realized he was fighting not only for custody of his daughters, but against an entire system built to protect appearances, regardless of the truth hidden behind them. Marco's apartment in the city center, normally a minimalist and impersonal space, had been transformed in the last 2 weeks. Colorful drawings adorned the stainless steel refrigerator, toys occupied the previously empty corners of the living room, and the aroma of home-cooked food replaced the smell of a sparsely inhabited place. But that morning, the atmosphere was one of apprehension. Sitting at the kitchen table, Marco watched the twins playing quietly on the living room rug. It was the day that, according to the court decision, they were to be transferred to Helena's custody for the following week. The idea of handing his daughters over to the woman who had hurt them so many times gnawed at him, but if he refused, he would be considered in contempt and would lose any chance in the battle for permanent custody. "They barely touched breakfast," Rose commented, entering the kitchen with slow steps. After the scare in court, the doctors had recommended complete bed rest to avoid premature labor. Even so, she insisted on helping with the girls. "You should be lying down," Marco replied, pulling out a chair for her. Rose sat down with a tired sigh. "I can't just stand here knowing that today is the day." Marco observed her face, deep dark circles under her eyes, pale skin. In the 2 weeks they had shared the apartment, a strange intimacy had developed between them. Not romantic, but a complicity born from their shared concern for the girls and the battle they faced together. "Victor is trying one last measure," he said, lowering his voice so the children wouldn't hear. "If we can get one more witness before noon, he believes the judge might suspend the visit." Rose's eyes lit up briefly. "Did you manage to speak with Pietro, the gardener?" Marco shook his head negatively. "He disappeared. Agnes probably bought him or scared him. She's been doing this to all the former employees we've tried to contact." Rose bit her lip, lost in thought. There was something she hadn't told Marco, a last card up her sleeve that she hesitated to use. But seeing the girls so frightened at the prospect of returning to their mother, she knew she had no choice. "There is someone," he finally said. "Someone Helena couldn't buy or intimidate." Marco leaned forward, intrigued. "Who?" "My sister, Fiona. She worked as a substitute nanny for 2 months while I was on leave to treat pneumonia. Helena never knew her real last name because we use different names. She saw things too." "And why have you never mentioned this before?" Rose looked away. "Fiona and we have a complicated relationship. We haven't spoken in almost a year. Besides, she has her own problems. I didn't want to involve her." Marco covered Rose's hand with his own. In recent days, small gestures of comfort like this had become natural between them. "Can we locate her? Time is running out." Rose hesitated for only a moment before picking up her cell phone. "I'll try." As she walked away to make the call, Marco turned his attention to the twins. He approached, sitting on the floor beside them. They were playing with building blocks, constructing an elaborate structure that resembled a fortress. "It's a safe house," Chiara explained, noticing her father's interest. with high walls so no one can get in. Marco felt a pang in his chest. Children should be building princess castles and spaceships, not fortresses to protect themselves. Girls, he began, choosing his words carefully. You know that today. Today you're going to spend time with Mommy. The blocks in Olivia's hands fell, and she immediately threw herself into her father's arms. Please don't send us back, Daddy. Please. Chiara didn't move, but her small shoulders tensed, and she began stacking the blocks with more force, each movement precise and controlled, as if trying to maintain control when everything around her was crumbling. I don't want to order you around, Marco said, hugging Olivia while extending his other arm to Chiara, who remained distant. But sometimes we have to follow rules we don't like, so we can change those rules later. Do you understand? She'll be even angrier because we left, Chiara whispered, finally abandoning the blocks. She always says we pay for anything we do wrong later. You did nothing wrong, Marco replied firmly, and I promise it won't take long. Just a week and then you can come back here. Will Rose be here when we get back? Olivia asked, wiping away her tears. Marco glanced into the kitchen, where Rose was speaking softly on the phone. In the 2 weeks they had spent together, she had become essential to the girls, and he had to admit to him as well. For the first time since discovering the abuse, he felt that there was someone who truly understood what his daughters had been through. Yes, Rose will be here, he promised. She's not going anywhere. The intercom rang, causing the 3 people in the room to freeze. Marco looked at the clock. There was still an hour to go before the time he had arranged to meet Helena. It must be Victor, she said, more to reassure the girls than because she actually believed it. He answered the intercom apprehensively. Yes? Marco Allianz? The unfamiliar voice on the intercom sounded formal and cold. Court officer, we are here to oversee the transfer of the minors to their mother's custody. Marco's blood ran cold. Helena had sent an officer an hour earlier to catch him off guard, ensuring he wouldn't have time to prepare the girls, or to get the additional witness they needed. The agreed time was noon, he protested. We have an order for immediate execution, sir. Miss Allianz is waiting in the official car. Marco hung up the intercom without answering, turning to the girls who were watching him with wide, frightened eyes. Rose had appeared in the kitchen doorway, her cell phone still in her hand, her expression alarmed. They're here, said Marco, his voice trembling. Helena is with them. Fiona agreed to testify, Rose replied quickly, but she's in the countryside 3 hours from here. She won't make it in time. The intercom rang again more insistently. Marco ran his hands over his face, desperate. If we don't comply, they'll come back with a search warrant, he said, and it will look like we're hiding the girls, which will only strengthen Helena's argument. Rose approached, kneeling with difficulty beside the twins. You are strong, she said, holding one hand of each of them. And you are brave. A week will pass quickly, and then you will be back here. But what if she does bad things again? Olivia asked, her voice breaking. Rose exchanged a distressed look with Marco before answering. If anything happens, anything at all, you call Dad or me immediately. Day or night, I promise we'll answer. Chiara, always the most pragmatic, frowned. She's going to take our cell phones. She always does. Marco felt despair growing inside him. How could he send his daughters into a situation he knew was potentially dangerous? But what was the alternative? To flee? That would guarantee Helena permanent custody. The intercom rang for the 3rd time. There was no more time. I'll go with you all the way down there, Marco decided, and I'll make it very clear to the officer and to Helena that I'll be watching closely. Any mark, any sign of mistreatment, and we'll return to the judge immediately. The girls gathered their small backpacks, which they had packed the night before. Marco noticed that they had only included the essentials, clothes, toothbrushes, and a small stuffed animal each. Nothing of sentimental value, nothing that could be confiscated as punishment. Go back to the room for a moment, Rose asked softly. I have something for you. The twins obeyed, and Rose took 2 small heart-shaped pendants from her bag. Inside each one was a tiny photo. On one side, Marco, on the other, Rose. Hide them well, she whispered, placing the necklaces around the girls' necks and concealing them under their shirts. Whenever you feel scared, you'll know you're not alone. That simple gesture, that tangible proof that they were loved, brought tears to the girls' eyes, and to Marco's, who watched from the doorway. The walk to the building's lobby was the longest of Marco's life. Each step seemed to take him further away from the right decision. How could he send his daughters back to an abusive environment, even temporarily? How could he fail them again? In the lobby, the bailiff waited, a middle-aged man with a neutral expression. Beside him stood Helena, impeccable in a conservative blue dress, her hair perfectly styled, the posture of a mother anxious to see her daughters again. "My dears," she said, opening her arms in a gesture that to any outside observer would seem loving. "Mom missed you so much." The twins hesitated, and Marco felt their small bodies tense beside him. Only the light pressure of his hand on their backs made them move forward. "Ms. Allianz," the officer said, consulting a document, "the transfer is for exactly 7 days, as per court order. Mr. Allianz must pick up the children next Sunday at 10 a.m. Helena smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, we'll be waiting." Marco knelt down, embracing his daughters one last time. "1 week," he whispered. 7 days, and then we'll be together again. I promise." When he stood up, he looked Helena straight in the eyes. "Any mark on them, any indication that they've been mistreated, and I won't wait for the lawsuit. Understand?" Helena maintained her forced smile. "Always so dramatic, Marco. The girls will be perfectly fine with me, as they always have been." The officer, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, cleared his throat. "We need to go, Mr. Allianz." Marco watched helplessly as his daughters were taken away by their mother. Olivia looked back one last time, tears silently streaming down her face. Chiara kept her eyes fixed ahead, her small jaw clenched in an expression no 6-year-old should have. When the official car door closed, taking his daughters with it, Marco felt his legs weaken. Only then did he notice that Rose had gotten out as well and was beside him, a comforting hand on his arm. "We did everything we could," she said softly. "Now we need to make sure it doesn't happen again." Marco nodded, unable to speak. The emptiness in his chest was almost physical. Back in the apartment, the silence was deafening. The building blocks still scattered on the carpet, the unfinished fortress, were like a painful symbol of the safety that had been ripped away from the girls. Marco's cell phone rang. It was Victor. "I heard they left earlier," the lawyer said without preamble. "Agnes must have pressured someone at the courthouse. I'm trying to have that overturned, but it's too late now," Marco finished, his voice hoarse. "They're gone." There was a heavy pause on the line. "Marco, we need to talk about your work. I received a call from the board. Agnes has friends on the board, and they are worried about the negative publicity." Marco closed his eyes. Of course, Agnes would attack from all angles. His professional empire, built over 2 decades, was now threatened. What do they want? A temporary leave of absence, until the scandal passes. Shares have fallen 3% since the story leaked to the press. Marco felt a cold rage growing inside him. His own wealth, his leadership position in the company, none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered were 2 terrified 6-year-old girls returning to the hands of their torturer. "Tell them they can shove the license wherever they want," he replied, surprising himself with his firmness. "If they want to fire me, let them. I have enough evidence of child abuse to ruin not only Helena and Agnes's reputation, but that of anyone who supports them, including the members of the board." He hung up before Victor could answer. When he turned around, he found Rose watching him with an expression that mixed admiration and concern. "You're risking everything," she said. Marco smiled bitterly. "No, I'm finally fighting for what really matters." The phone rang again. Marco answered, expecting to hear Victor trying to calm him down. But it was an unfamiliar female voice. "Mr. Allianz? This is Fiona Carmin, Rose's sister. I'm on my way to the capital, and I have something you need to see." Marco put the phone on speakerphone so Rose could hear. "What's wrong?" he asked, trying to control the hope in his voice. "Videos," Fiona replied. "Helena never knew, but I installed hidden cameras in the girls' room when I worked there. After everything I saw, I knew they would be needed someday." The waiting room at Victor's office was silent, except for the occasional clinking of coffee cups and the soft tapping of efficient secretaries' keyboards. Marco paced back and forth, unable to sit still, checking his cell phone every few minutes. It had been 48 hours since the twins had left with Helena, and the silence was agonizing. No calls, no messages. "They're fine," Rose said for the 3rd time, sitting in a leather armchair, absent-mindedly stroking her belly. Helena won't risk doing anything now that she knows we're watching. Marco wanted to believe it. He really did. But he knew Helena's capacity for subtle revenge well, the kind that leaves no visible marks. Fiona's been in there with Victor for an hour now, he commented, looking at the closed door of the main office. Is that good or bad? Rose sighed. Fiona is meticulous. If she says she has evidence, it's because she really does. Finally, the office door opened. Victor appeared first, his normally composed face displaying a difficult-to-read expression, a mixture of triumph and dismay. Behind him came a woman, who Marco immediately recognized as Rose's sister, though they were quite different. Where Rose was gentle and reserved, Fiona appeared intense and direct, with sharp eyes that quickly assessed Marco. "We have what we need," Victor announced, gesturing for them to come in. "And it's more than I expected." Inside the spacious office, Victor positioned himself behind his desk, while Fiona plugged a USB drive into the computer. "Before I show you this," she said, her professional tone contrasting with her violet hair and multiple tattoos on her arms, "I need you to understand one thing. What you're about to see is difficult. It's cruel, but it's exactly what we need to end this charade of the devoted mother." Marco nodded, feeling his stomach clench. "Show me." Fiona gave her sister a worried look. "Rose, are you sure you want to see that again? In your condition?" "I've seen the worst personally," Rose replied firmly. "I'm not going to look away now." Fiona shrugged and clicked on a file. The large screen on the office wall lit up, showing the twins' room, filmed from a high angle, probably from a small hidden camera near the ceiling light. The date in the lower corner showed that the recording was from 8 months ago. Helena entered the frame, her face contorted in an expression Marco had never seen during their years of marriage, pure, uncontrolled rage. She dragged Olivia by the arm, the girl crying silently. "Do you think you can embarrass me like this?" Helena hissed, shaking the child. "In front of Grandma Agnes and all the guests?" "It was an accident, Mom," Olivia sobbed. "I just wanted to show you my drawing." The sound of a slap cut through the air, making Marco instinctively rise from his chair, as if he could intervene in something that had already happened months ago. He watched in horror as Helena forced her daughter to kneel in the corner of the room, on grains of uncooked rice scattered on the floor. "You'll stay here until you learn," Helena declared, adjusting her elegant dress. "And if you hear even a sound, the punishment doubles. Understand?" Little Olivia simply nodded, silent tears streaming down her face, as she tried to balance on her knees atop the sharp grains. When Helena left the room, Chiara, who had been silently watching from the bed, crept up to her sister, trying to place a pillow under her knees. "No, Chi," Olivia whispered in a panic. "She'll know. She always knows." Marco felt nauseous as he watched the compilation of similar scenes. Helena locking the girls in the closet for hours. Helena forcing them to stand motionless for impossible periods of time for such young children. Helena throwing food away when they didn't finish within her allotted time. In each video, the same elegant and controlled woman whom society admired transformed into a merciless tyrant as soon as the doors closed. "There are dozens of videos like these," Fiona explained, pausing the playback. "I filmed them during the 2 months I filled in for Rose. When she came back, I left the cameras there. They're motion-activated and store in the cloud." "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" Rose asked, her voice trembling. Fiona looked away. "I tried. But you were so busy trying to prosecute Helena legally, and then you lost your job. I thought you wouldn't believe me without proof, and I didn't know if the videos would be admissible. After all, I installed the cameras without authorization." Victor, who had been observing everything with a serious expression, intervened. "Normally, recordings obtained without consent would be problematic, but there is case law for cases involving the protection of minors, and more importantly, we have that." He pointed to the screen, where a new video was now playing. This time, it was Helena's home office. She was on the phone, visibly annoyed. "I don't care how much it costs, Aaron," she told the lawyer. "Fabricate the evidence if you need to. I want full custody and I want Marco destroyed. My mother is already taking care of the financial side, pressuring his partners." Marco felt his blood run cold. It was explicit confirmation of the conspiracy that Agnes and Helena had orchestrated against him. "And there's more," Fiona continued, moving on to another file. "This is from 3 days ago after the first hearing. The scene showed Helena in her room accompanied by her mother, Agnes. The two were discussing strategies while Helena retrieved jewels from a safe. "The more witnesses we can silence, the better," Agnes said, examining a list on her tablet. "I've already taken care of the housekeeper, the driver, and the security guard. The gardener is reluctant, but every man has his price." "And what about that meddler Rose?" asked Helena, picking apart several diamond rings. Agnes smiled coldly. "Leave it to me. I have contacts who can make her decide that testifying isn't worth the risk, especially in her condition." Victor paused the video, his face serious. "This is an explicit threat to a witness, as well as an attempt to obstruct justice, combined with the evidence of child abuse and the recent confessions of falsifying evidence. We have a solid case," Marco concluded, feeling a mixture of relief and horror. "Can we get the girls out of there now?" Victor hesitated. "Technically, we need to present this evidence to the judge first, but given the nature of the threats and the imminent danger to the children, I can request an emergency order. The problem is that it would need to be the same judge who granted joint custody, and Agnes probably already has it in the palm of her hand," Marco concluded bitterly. "Perhaps not," Fiona interjected, a determined glint in her eyes. "Not if we make it impossible for him to ignore the evidence." Everyone turned to her, intrigued. Fiona smiled, a smile vaguely reminiscent of Rose's, but with a hint of danger. "I'm an investigative journalist," she explained. "I specialize in corporate corruption and abuse of power. I know people who would love to expose how an influential figure like Agnes Muller is manipulating the judicial system to protect an abusive daughter." Marco felt a shiver of apprehension. "Are you suggesting we leak the videos?" "Not the children's," Fiona clarified quickly. "We would never expose Olivia and Chiara like that. But the videos of Helena and Agnes conspiring, the explicit confession of manipulating evidence and witnesses, that's journalistic gold." Victor seemed hesitant. "It's a risky strategy. It could harm the case if it looks like we're trying to influence public opinion." "It would be riskier to leave my daughters with that woman for another 5 days," Marco retorted. "I've seen enough. I'm not going to wait until something irreversible happens." At that moment, Marco's cell phone vibrated. He picked it up, his heart racing when he saw it was a message from an unknown number. When he opened it, he saw a photo. Olivia, her face red from crying, holding a handwritten sign that read, "I miss you, Dad." "What is that?" Rose asked, noticing her alarmed expression. "I don't know," he replied, showing the image. "It came from a number I don't recognize." A second later, another message arrived. "It's me, Alan, the new driver. Helena confiscated the girls' cell phones just as you predicted. They're physically okay but crying a lot. Helena won't let them talk to anyone. I think they wrote this in secret. I can't get involved any further or I'll lose my job, but I thought you should know." "This confirms that she is isolating the girls," Victor said, reading the message over Marco's shoulder. "It's a classic pattern of psychological abuse. I can use this in the emergency petition." Marco tried to reply to the driver, thanking him and asking him to remain vigilant, but the message bounced back as undelivered. The number had already been deactivated. "We're going to pursue both paths," he decided, with renewed determination. "Victor is preparing the emergency petition, and Fiona is using her contacts to ensure the story reaches the right people. I'm not going to wait another day to get my daughters out of that place." While the others discussed the details, Marco noticed that Rose was strangely quiet, her face paler than usual. "Are you okay?" he asked, approaching her. She tried to smile, but the gesture turned into a grimace of pain. "Just one more contraction. They're getting more frequent." Marco frowned, worried. "How long has it been?" "Since last night," she admitted. "But they're irregular. The doctor said it's normal to have false contractions at this stage." Before Marco could insist, Victor approached, cell phone in hand, and an expression of urgency. "I just received a call from my secretary," he said. "Helena is at the courthouse right now, requesting full custody of the girls. She's alleging that you and Rose are conspiring to alienate the children and that the marks documented by the doctors were fabricated." Marco felt his blood boil. "She can't be serious." "Worse," Victor continued, "she's claiming you have a history of violent behavior and that the girls confessed to being afraid of you." Rose paled even more. "That's absurd. The girls adore Marco." "Helena knows she's losing," Fiona analyzed coldly. She's playing every card, no matter how absurd, hoping something will stick. It's a desperate tactic. Victor nodded. Exactly, which means our time is running out. Marco, grab your coat. We're going to the courthouse right now to present the new evidence. Fiona, you're coming with us as a witness. Rose. I'm going too, she declared, rising with determination despite her visible discomfort. Rose, your doctor said complete rest, Marco protested. These girls are practically mine, she replied with a firmness that clung to no discussion. I'm not going to sit out the most important fight because of a few inconveniences. Let's end this once and for all. As they left the office, a storm began to form on the horizon, heavy, dark clouds that seemed to reflect the approaching battle. Marco looked at the overcast sky, remembering the fateful night he had found his daughters shivering in the rain, a night that had changed everything. It ends today, he promised himself and the little girls whose faces wouldn't leave his mind. Today you go home forever. The main hall of the central courthouse was packed, far more crowded than would normally be the case for a custody hearing. Journalists crowded the back, some with notepads, others discreetly holding tape recorders. Fiona's strategy had worked quickly. A few phone calls were all it took for the news that the respected Agnes Muller was involved in a judicial manipulation scandal to spread through media circles. Marco sat stiffly next to Victor, his gaze fixed on the door through which Helena and her lawyer would enter. Rose was to his left, visibly uncomfortable, one hand constantly resting on her stomach, while the other firmly held Marco's, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by the photographers present. Ignore them, Victor whispered, noticing Marco's tension. The more dramatic they make the story seem, the better for us. Agnes won't be able to cover it up now. At that moment, Helena entered, accompanied by her lawyer, Aaron Lehman. She looked surprisingly composed, dressed in an elegant grey dress that suggested sobriety and respectability. Upon seeing her, Marco felt a cold rage course through his veins. How could she present herself like that, so serene, after everything she had done? More shocking, however, was the absence of the twins. "Where are my daughters?" he asked, standing up abruptly. Helena ignored him, walking to her seat with her head held high. It was Aaron who answered with a condescending smile. "The girls are being spared this spectacle, Mr. Allianz. They are safe at home with their grandmother." "With Agnes?" Marco exclaimed. "After everything we've seen in the videos?" A murmur swept through the room. It was the first public mention of the videos Fiona had strategically leaked to a few key people, only the footage showing Helena and Agnes plotting, never the scenes with the children. Victor pulled Marco back into his chair. "Calm down," he whispered. "That's exactly what they want, for you to look out of control." At that moment, the judge entered, not the same one from the previous hearing, but a middle-aged woman with a stern expression and sharp eyes. Marco felt a pang of hope. A last-minute substitution meant that Agnes's plan to manipulate the original judge might have been thwarted. "Good morning," Judge Viola began. "I am substituting for Judge Ollins, who recused himself from this case due to a potential conflict of interest. I am Dr. Viola Lehman." Victor leaned in, whispering to Marco, "Lehman, as Helena's lawyer?" "Distant cousin," replied the judge, who had apparently overheard the comment. "And that doesn't affect my impartiality, lawyer. In fact, I know my cousin's methods well, which makes me especially wary of any inappropriate procedural maneuvers." Aaron Lehman swallowed hard, visibly uncomfortable. Helena maintained a neutral expression, but her fingers drummed nervously on the table, a tic Marco knew well from their years of marriage. She was worried. "I have two urgent requests here," the judge continued, adjusting her glasses. "One from Ms. Helena Allianz, requesting full custody of her minor daughters, alleging parental alienation and inappropriate behavior on the part of the father, and another from Mr. Marco Allianz, requesting the immediate revocation of shared custody and sole custody for himself based on new evidence of child abuse. Is that correct?" Both lawyers confirmed this. "Well," she continued, "before hearing the arguments, I would like to clarify something. I have become aware through unofficial channels of videos that allegedly show Ms. Helena Allianz and her mother, Agnes Muller, discussing ways to manipulate this process, including threats to witnesses. These videos are circulating in the press. Can someone explain this to me?" A tense silence filled the room. Helena glared angrily at Marco, who held her gaze without wavering. "Your Honor," Aaron began, "these alleged videos were obtained illegally, violating my client's privacy, and edited to appear as something they are not." "Your Excellency," Victor interrupted, standing up, "we have the original unedited videos, obtained from cameras installed by the children's former nanny, who had legitimate concerns for their safety. Furthermore, we have videos that explicitly show Ms. Helena physically abusing her daughters on several occasions." The judge leaned forward, intrigued. "That's a very serious accusation, lawyer. Who is this former nanny?" Fiona stood up from the back of the room. "It's me, Your Excellency, Fiona Carmin. I worked at the Allianz household for 2 months, substituting for my sister, Rose." The judge observed the two sisters, noting the resemblance. "And you simply decided to install cameras in your employer's house?" "Yes, ma'am," Fiona replied without hesitation. "After witnessing Helena dragging Chiara by the hair on the 3rd day of work, I knew I needed proof. No one would believe my word alone against that of a woman like Helena Allianz." Helena stood up abruptly. "That's absurd. That woman is lying. I would never hurt my daughters." The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Allianz, please sit down. You will have your chance to speak." Turning to Victor, she continued, "Attorney, I want to see those videos immediately. We'll take a 30-minute recess so I can review them in my chambers." As the judge left, a buzz filled the courtroom. Journalists whispered excitedly, some already typing on their cell phones. The situation had turned into the kind of scandal Agnes most feared: public, uncontrollable, and potentially devastating to the family's reputation. Marco watched Helena, who was conferring intensely with Aaron. She seemed somehow smaller, less intimidating. For a moment, their eyes met, and Marco saw something he had never noticed before: fear. Helena was afraid. "It's not going to work," whispered Rose, who had been watching the exchange of glances. "She's realizing she's no longer in control of the situation." Marco nodded slowly. "I just want my daughters back. The rest doesn't matter." Rose tried to smile, but her face contorted in an expression of pain. Marco noticed she was clutching her stomach tighter. "Rose, are you okay?" "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice tense. "The contractions are getting stronger and more frequent. I think the baby might be coming." Marco felt panic rising. "We need to take her to the hospital." "No," Rose insisted, gripping his arm with surprising force. "Not until we resolve this. Not until the girls are safe." Before Marco could argue, the courtroom doors opened again, and a shocked murmur swept through the room. Agnes Müller entered, impeccably dressed as always, but with a furious expression, and beside her, 2 small figures, Olivia and Chiara, dressed in identical blue dresses, their hair perfectly combed, looking like porcelain dolls. "Daddy!" Olivia cried, trying to run to Marco, but was stopped by Agnes's firm hand on her shoulder. "Behave yourselves," Agnes hissed in a low tone that was nevertheless heard by several people present. Marco stood up, his heart pounding violently against his chest. "Release my daughters, Agnes." The matriarch ignored him, walking straight to Helena. Chiara kept her eyes downcast, but Olivia couldn't stop looking at Marco and Rose, her eyes pleading for help. Victor approached Marco. "That's good," he whispered. "Agnes made a mistake bringing the girls. The judge can question them directly if she wants." At that moment, the office door opened, and the judge returned, her face considerably more serious than when she had left. Upon seeing the twins, she frowned. "I did not order the children to be brought," she said coldly. Agnes stepped forward. "Excuse me, Your Excellency, I am Agnes Müller, the girl's grandmother. I thought it was important that they be present to refute the false accusations against my daughter." The judge observed Agnes with a penetrating gaze. "Mrs. Müller, this is not a show to which children are brought as accessories. Furthermore, after watching the videos presented, I have serious reservations about your presence near these children." A stunned silence fell over the room. Agnes, accustomed to intimidating judges and authorities with her influence, seemed genuinely shocked by the public reprimand. "Now," the judge continued, "in light of what I've seen, I'm going to make a preliminary decision. Officer, please bring the children to me." A court officer gently approached Olivia and Chiara, who glanced nervously at Agnes before following the man. The judge smiled at them, a gentle smile that contrasted sharply with the severity of moments before. The judge crouched down to the twins' level and asked gently, "Olivia, Chiara, would you like to speak with me in private?" They both nodded. In the office, they finally told the whole truth. When they returned to court, the judge was made up her mind. "I grant full custody to Mr. Allianz. Helena Allianz and Agnes Muller are prohibited from having unsupervised contact." At that moment, Rose groaned loudly. "The baby! Ambulance!" Marco shouted. Hours later, at the hospital, the twins gazed in wonder at little Noah in Rose's arms. "Can we be his sisters too?" Olivia asked. Marco and Rose exchanged glances. "We're already a family," Marco replied, embracing the three people who had taught him the true meaning of love. 5 years later, on the balcony of their seaside house, the twins, now 11 years old, were helping their little brother build sandcastles. Rose watched the scene with tears in her eyes as Marco hugged her from behind. "We're eating in the rain," he whispered with a smile, recalling the words that changed everything. "No," Rose corrected. "We're dancing in the sun." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Marco, Rose, and the twins Olivia and Chiara has touched your hearts. For more moving narratives like this, we've prepared a special playlist with stories of overcoming challenges and new beginnings. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If this journey of healing and family renewal touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of family bonds and the transformative power of true love. Share in the comments if you have witnessed or lived a story of family reconstruction. We look forward to reading your experiences.